Morning. I was planning a great sermon for today. I had this really amazing, cool video that we were going to play to get started. And Michael and I had worked up a whiteboard, so I was going to be down here writing on a whiteboard, and he had set the cameras up to zoom in on it, so everything I wrote would be up on the screens, and I was going to use my amazing artistic ability. I was going to draw stick figures. But later in the week, I found myself near the end of a day kind of just thinking through my day and processing my thoughts and just realizing that some of the things that I was thinking about would really work well as a sermon, particularly as part of our Caring for One Another series, which we're starting today. And so I decided that, this just feels like maybe I need to work with this a little bit, and by the end of the evening, it was really clear to me that, this was the sermon I was supposed to preach, and the one that I had prepared and gotten already needed to go in a file folder somewhere and be saved for another day. So someday maybe you'll get to see the video and the whiteboard, but not today. Instead, what I want to do today is something a little bit different. I think it's kind of like a fireside chat. I just want to talk to you about some of the things that have been going through my mind and some of the things that I've been thinking about, and not just in the past week or in the past month, but really things that I've been processing for a year or 2 years, things that I've been studying, particularly as they relate to how we take care of one another. And so I'm just going to talk to you today, and maybe you'll fall asleep, I don't know. I was talking to some people last night who said, why do you, when you preach, sometimes you're running all over the place and you're yelling and shouting? And I said, well, really, it's because I get bored and I want to wake myself up. It'd be real embarrassing to fall asleep while you're preaching. But no running or shouting today, just kind of me just kind of talking through some things. So that's what I want to do. This week was not an out-of-the-ordinary week for me. My family got home from camp on Monday, so it was a little bit of a shorter week. But Tuesday, Wednesday went pretty normal. And then Thursday and Friday weren't as normal, but not terribly abnormal. Over the course of the week, there were a couple things that really prompted me and got me thinking. I had two conversations with people this week. And, you might call them counseling appointments. Basically, somebody called me up and said, hey, I need to talk to you. I said, great, let's talk. And set up a time, and we sat down and talked. And while both of these conversations were very different from each other, there was just this overwhelming sense that I had after the second one particularly, and I was thinking about both of them in the same context, that, life is really hard sometimes. And people really are struggling through life. And both conversations really highlighted for me the struggles of working through life. And I thought, these people are difficult, and I do my best in these kinds of conversations to, pray with them, to offer some advice, to ask them some questions, to maybe help. But as I walked away from each conversation, I just really, my mind was heavy with the burdens that these people were carrying. And then on Thursday, as I was driving home from Grand Rapids, I had to meet a man from the seminary there, and I was driving back, and I got a phone call from one of my former students, Jeremy Sanderson, who probably a lot of you know. He's more well-known in the second service, whose wedding I had done about a month ago. And Jeremy said, hey, Dave, just wanted you to know that Jackie, his new wife, is in the hospital. And he said, it's kind of serious. She has a blood clot in her leg. And I said, I'm on my way back from Grand Rapids right now, and they were in Grand Haven. I said, do you want me to come to the hospital? He's like, yeah, I do. So, okay, I'll be there quickly. And what started, in my mind, I'm obviously not a real medical guy, but I understand blood clots. I thought, she's young, probably just got a little blood clot. They'll put her on bed rest, maybe try to thin her blood out a little bit, and hopefully, they can treat it. Well, it turns out the blood clot goes from her knee to her hip. So it's very serious, and by the end of the day, they had transported her to Mercy. Friday, she went into surgery, which was successful. But I ended up spending a lot of time in the hospital with Jackie and Jeremy and their families. And it was Thursday, while I was in the ER at Mercy, in the waiting room, and I kind of went in the bathroom for a little bit to kind of take a break, splash some water on my face, try to wake up. And I was thinking through the week that I had had. You know, these two conversations that were really weighing on me, and now this time I was spending at the hospital. And I thought to myself, you know, the reality of all of this is that I spent a lot of time this week with people who are hurting and who need care. But I'm not doing this because I'm a pastor. I'm doing this because I'm their friend. You see, in all of these situations, it wasn't something that I did because I was a pastor. Now, there are times when I do sit down and I talk with people because I'm their pastor. And there are times when I go to the hospital and visit people because I'm their pastor. But in each of these situations, these were the people who are close to me, who I share my life with. They're in a small circle of my friends. And I realized I was investing my time in caring for them, not because I was their pastor, but because I was their friend. And so I began to think about this idea of taking care of one another, knowing that I was preaching on it this Sunday. And I started thinking, how do we move to the place where we don't see caring for each other as just the responsibility of the pastors, but as something that we all do for each other? And I began to process those kinds of thoughts in my mind and say, how can I communicate that? And that's when I really decided I need to change what I'm talking about, and I need to go a completely different direction. And so this morning, what I want to talk to you about is this idea that came to my mind, and here's what it is. If I could tie it up in a neat little package, I would say this. Jesus never intended for his church to be full of helpless sheep who only rely on their pastor. Now, that's a strong statement, so I'm going to back away from it just a little bit, because there's a lot of onlys and helpless, and I don't want it to come off as a strong, mean, nasty statement. And I'm certainly not trying to say, yeah, we pastors, we shouldn't have to do anything. But what I'm trying to say is Jesus, his intent was never for you to have a helpless feeling and only let the pastors take care of everybody. That was never his intent. Sometimes when we think about pastors, well, a lot of times, we think about a metaphor that's rich throughout the whole Bible. And it's the metaphor of a shepherd. In fact, the word pastor actually comes from the word shepherd. And so it's not uncommon for us to think of our pastors as shepherds. And so I want to take some time and kind of trace where that comes from. As you think about the Bible and the big picture of the Bible, the idea of shepherd runs through the whole thing. And almost always, when you see a shepherd or a shepherdess in the Bible, you see someone who is portrayed as virtuous, as almost innocent. Who is the first shepherd in the Bible? Further back. Abel, all the way back to Genesis 4. Abel was the first shepherd. And of course, we know that you had Cain and you had Abel, and Abel was the virtuous son. And then think about the other shepherds, even in Genesis. Abraham was a shepherd, and Isaac and Jacob and even Joseph. They were all shepherds. All of the patriarchs of the Jewish nation, the forefathers of our faith, were all shepherds. And then, of course, maybe the most famous shepherd of all time was King David. And there you have this neat picture of David who went directly from being a shepherd to being anointed. And so you see this idea of shepherding as it goes through the Bible, the idea that shepherds are these virtuous people who do God's bidding. But of course, there's more pictures of shepherds. God is portrayed as our shepherd. Psalm 23, maybe the most beloved psalm ever, is a psalm all about how God is our shepherd and how he takes care of us. He leads us to water. He makes us lie down in green pastures. Jesus is our shepherd. Jesus is the good shepherd who gives his life for the sheep. And he talks about himself in those words and how he knows his sheep and his sheep know him.